violence, it can't be because the two of you are in a house together and you are male and she's female and you fought, then that has become gender-based?
No. It all goes back to the power dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And power, just not because you are physically strong, but probably because you also hold a higher position as opposed to the other person. And of course, that comes in the question like sexual harassment, for example, at the workplace. You know, your supervisor, this is an intern, power dynamics. In the house, this person feels I am more superior than you in physique, for example. So then I'm able to hurt you and there's nothing you're going to do about it. Power dynamics, I know
But in any kind of violence, there's going to be power dynamics.
Yeah.
A big guy like Martin, I can't beat him. He'll beat me.
Sure.
So?
Yeah, and it also draws down to the forms, again, of gender-based violence. Aspects like rape, gang rape, right? Female genital mutilation. I mean, this has not happened to maybe the male gender, FGM. Early child marriages. Young girls are being taken and being, the bride price is being paid at the age of 16, at the age of 15, right? Just for the family to get more income. I mean, it also draws down to then what are the forms that leads us to gender-based violence.
Okay.
Well, young boys are subjected to hard labor by their family members. We also call that gender-based violence.
But that isn't violence.
No,
Because we talked about...
That's child labor.
No, that's child labor.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
FGM is FGM. Early marriage is early marriage. Is it GBV?
Actually,
Well,
no.
early marriage is not, actually when you look at the laws of the land, early marriage is actually not permissible under our laws. You are only allowed to marry once you attain the age of 18. So
Neither is child labor allowed in law.
yeah, so same to child labor is also not acceptable or permitted within the laws of our land. So when you look at some of these retrogressive practices in some of in some retrogressive cultural practices, yes, there are some tribes that continuously practice them, but over the years, civil society organizations have tried to work closely and try to bring an end to this. Of course, the government has put in a few policy and legal frameworks to try to deal with the issue of child labor or early marriages. But when it comes to gender-based violence, Latif and City and Do, there is no specific piece of legislation that actually criminalizes the crime of, that provides for the crime of genocide. The pieces of legislation that are there in Kenya, like the Sexual Offences Act, are actually broad, so that it's broad application to all Kenyans, or all of us here, and that may explain why there are increased cases of gender-based violence. Because if there is no framework of actually holding you to account for a specific crime, then it simply means that you cannot actually...
Can I push this envelope a little bit?
Yes, you cannot deter people from actually continuously committing that.
Probably one of the reasons is because we just can't seem to completely agree what GBV is. We keep mixing things up. So, for example, you've quoted the case of that very, very unfortunate case of that young girl.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Mweni.
Right? Murdered in the most brutal way.
Yeah.
By this person, whatever they did. Can we say that she was killed because she's a woman?
And of course, it draws back to, and what I think was mentioned by City before, what preceded, what was happening before. It was an ex-lover, right? Probably they had some issues about this person now has moved on, has another partner, and it's the moment of speaking and arguing, and then that happens. Another situation of, you are the father of my children, you need to provide for your children, even though you've proceeded on with your life. So again, it brings up a situation whereby the woman feels that you've now left me with the children, which is probably the most cases. So now then who's going to provide for them? Again, provides a scenario whereby now you can argue, you can have a heated conversation, like all people do. But now because there is also power dynamics, there is also an aspect of we were once together, right? Now you have proceeded and you seem, and of course the lady would be like, now you're proceeding, you've left with the children, and now you can freely move. Well, I'm here being held back and having to provide. I don't have the financial muscle like you do, again, which is the Kenyan situation. Then it opens a box whereby gender-based violence can happen. And then, is it a scenario that is a touch and go? No. In fact, research has showed that most women undergo what we call cycle of violence 7 times for them to come out. And the cycle of violence is where it happens, right? And then you go to a point where the perpetrator says, oh, so sorry that happened. Please don't report me or not do this again. And so you have what the cycle of violence reaches to honeymoon stage. Everything is fine. People see you holding hands together, and your neighbors will see you fighting, and then they're like, oh, these people. And then there's always that saying of people who are on the same bed, right? So again, the cycle of violence continues. Then all of a sudden, the perpetrator changes. You start walking to what we call the stage of eggshells. So now you're worried. You're like, oh my God, I don't want this to happen again, because it has happened again. And then the perpetration now happens. The offense happens. Maybe it's assault, the psychological and the emotional abuse, whatever abuse it is. That is the first cycle. So the research shows that this particular woman undergoes 7 times that cycle before they actually go to the next police station and say, guys, I have been undergoing gender-based violence. So even as we see women report, there is so much that they have undergone before. 7 cycles. And the 7 cycle can be 1 year, can be 6 years, can be 20 years. And of course, as a society, we are like, hey, come out of that marriage. Hey, come out of that relationship.
But you know something?
Yeah.
You paint a picture that explains what we are talking about with clarity.
Yeah.
But I'd like us to take just a step back. What is it that were the influences in these 2 people's lives? What is it that molded them to become the people they are? We talk about social norms, societal influences, and so forth. But we look at a country like ours, and you look at some of the things that have been inherent. There are communities that feel they were discriminated against. There are people who feel that they were never given a fair shake of it. There are people who feel that their poverty is as a result of the government they've elected mismanaging their resources. There are communities who feel everything that I've just said and they feel it is them. Now, if you grow up in whatever community with this particular feeling, you've actually been violated and you probably don't know. You've actually been brutalized, but you actually don't know. So your natural reaction when something doesn't work is to do the same as was done to you. You brutalized. This is something that researchers have found over and over and documented, and then some. But look at what is happening now and look at the correlation of the brutalization that has been brought about by the socioeconomic situations we have in this country and the direct correlation with what we see as these violent episodes that when we look at the sample, we say it's against women. Why? People who are brutalized focus on people who are weaker, not stronger. People who are disadvantaged, people who are dependent, because some of this violence is also directed at children.
Yeah.
Now, if we focus on what we see and we do not give adequate attention to why it is what it is, because this situation is escalating, it's accelerating, it's not going down.
Exactly.
Agreed.
So if I may, Siti, while I do agree, while I partly agree with you that yes, I mean the context in which we all citizens or all Kenyans growing, you may indirectly face some forms of violation. The stark reality is that when people grow up in different environments and different backgrounds. Now, a man and a woman are brought together by basically, they're attracted to one another through, let's say, basically by emotions. So you start a relationship, and then before you know it, things go haywire. But in most instances, most of these cases, actually, in fact, I think maybe there are certain instances, maybe 5 or 10%, whereby you have somebody who is just obsessed about, committing crime. For instance, if you look at the quarry killings that Vivian had mentioned, and the suspect that was arraigned, we were meant to believe that this is somebody who used to lure women and just, kill them, not necessarily having a relationship with them. So in society, there could be those bad apples whereby there's somebody who's just obsessed about, preying on women and actually ending their lives. But the bulk of the gender-based violence cases usually emanate from a relationship. There must be a relationship of some sort that actually goes haywire at some point in time. So, but that cannot be attributed to the different violations that maybe the country has subjected us to. Because
why not?
That's primarily because, yes, in as much as the Constitution places a burden on the state, to ensure to ensure that all Kenyans enjoy all the rights that are enshrined under Chapter 4. I mean, there's only there's that degree of expectation that you would expect a country to do, or there's a degree of things that you'd expect them to do. They cannot, outrightly deal with all our problems comprehensively, or all the problems that many people in society face comprehensively. But there must be progression. But when you look at the stark reality that we face in Kenya here is there's, if you remember Ali said, there's lack of political will. From where I sit, I want to believe that if the government woke up today and said, moving forward, we are going to comprehensively deal with sexual and gender-based violence or gender-based violence, then that is a thing that they can comprehend.
May I? Sorry.
Sure.
I think that, and maybe you can help me out. I think that if government woke up one day and said that we are going to comprehensively deal with a mental health issue that we have in the country, I think that would be a marked, significant difference from what we see. Because I have to go to maybe a few years ago when we saw rampant cases of women who were taking manhood, who were cutting off men's manhood, right? They were cutting them off. There were men who died. There were men who were rendered literally dead because of what was happening. It was rampant. You have an argument with a man, you get a knife, the next thing, it's gone, right? What did we label that? What did we label that? Did we start to say that there's an increase of violence against men perpetuated by women? And were we now saying that men were dying because they are men? So when we look at this gender picture, how are we looking at it? And I think the things that cause a lot of the violence that we see is not necessarily because people woke up one day and said, I'm going to wield an axe. I think they're compacted mental health issues that are affecting people, and you will take it out on the weaker individual at that moment in that relationship. We can talk about government and legal frameworks, but I think that there's a lot of unpacking on the social point that we have to do. In fact, whether it is in school, whether it is in social groups, taking the mental health issue into because police can shoot guns for years.
We'll come up with all the laws.
We can come up with laws. But you can imagine a boy or a girl who's grown up seeing violence every single day. What do you think they're going to do when they grow? Or are faced with a situation whereby it's the only way out?
Yeah, that's partly right, too. But you see, the sad, the long and short of it is that, again, the state cannot be, it cannot abdicate its duty to its citizens. Violence can only happen on a daily when the state has actually deliberately decided to abdicate its duties. There is a question that City asked earlier. Why do we why do we think this is an obligation of the police? Now, when you look at our constitution, the police is primarily tasked with maintaining law and order. That is why all of us citizens pay taxes. That is why every 5 years we elect leaders to serve for and on behalf of their citizens. And by doing so, they are given a specific obligation to ensure that all of us are actually, have a good governance structure, that we are all safe and secure. So it can't be that, we have elected leaders, you have citizens paying taxes, and then you still want to place that obligation on the very citizens who are actually paying taxes and who have actually elected leaders to actually serve in different positions. So the long and short of it is that those tasked with those in positions of authority cannot actually abdicate that duty, because they must ensure that all Kenyans are able to be in a safe and secure environment. Because if we go on like because the long and short of it is, if we proceed like this, then you must ask yourself, in all due honesty, who actually is sleeping on the job.
Martin,
right?
the law will not solve this issue.
No, it's not the law. We are talking about those with you see,
Those
when you
who-
have a duty to
those who
perform
have
a
a duty.
certain, yes.
Those who have a duty are the police.
Yes.
How are we dealing with FGM? We have a law on FGM. How are we doing? The police, the Ngaos are there with FGM. How are we doing? I keep arguing, we don't look back at why do communities continue practicing FGM
because
with high literacy levels in this country.
Yeah.
And you will find even people who are exposed to some level of education would still go back and practice FGM. We don't ask ourselves those questions. Same thing, we're not asking ourselves, so what is this GBV? The victim, like you've said, it's power.
Yeah.
Are we saying that this violence only happened from one person to the weaker person? Or was it happening among the two, but then the stronger person prevailed? What is it that's happening in this home that is leading to this kind of violence? Is it only one directional?
Thank you for bringing the name home, because gender is not sex, right? Gender is the roles and responsibilities, right? Based on your sex. So as you grow up, you are given, probably when you are playing with the boys around your neighborhood and your girls, it is automatic that the girl will be told, start cooking at that corner. The boys are going to fetch some water for you, or alternatively from other areas, the woman or the young girl is told, please take the water and come and cook. And these are kids, and the parents comfortably will say that, yeah, you guys just play, and no, let him drive. He's done to drive, but you girls stay back at home. So these people grow up, right? And then now they find themselves in that house, either as boyfriend and girlfriend, for example. And then, of course, the financial muscle comes in, whereby it's almost automatic that you're the one now to go out and look for that. Go out and look for the food of this house. Then I'll remain and take care of the children. And that's why later then, takes back to what I was mentioning, this woman is finding herself, most instances, having to speak and to say that, what do I do with these children whom now you've left me with? Maintenance issues around emotional torture, trying to gaslight you, and of course the mental issues, it's agreeable. But let's not give a reason as to why gender-based violence should happen.
No, we should.
Yeah.
We should seek to explain why it's happening.
Yes,
We can't
exactly.
run away from it.
Yeah.
Well, this conversation must continue for the next 14 days. Today is the second of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. What is it? Why do we see it happening? Why do we see a rise in cases of gender-based violence, even femicide in this country? Martin Mavinjina is a senior program advisor in charge of transitional justice at Kenya Human Rights Commission. Vivian Mwende is head of programs at the Independent Medical Legal Unit. It's 8 a.m. Time for the news.
Spice up your life.